The coffee spilled across the table like his hopes, sudden, messy, and impossible to contain. Mark froze, watching Ellie's expression shift from nervous anticipation to something more complex as the words hung between them. "I'm a single mom." 3 words that shouldn't have changed anything, yet somehow changed everything. The bustling restaurant seemed to fade into background noise as Mark's mind raced to process this unexpected revelation, his carefully constructed vision of their future suddenly requiring a complete redesign. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more emotional journeys that explore the complicated reality of modern relationships. Your support means everything to us as we continue to bring these authentic human experiences to life. Mark hadn't planned on meeting anyone that night. After his promotion at the architectural firm, colleagues had dragged him to celebrate at a new jazz bar downtown. The promotion had been the culmination of 3 years of late nights and sacrificed weekends, finally validating his decision to leave his hometown for the opportunities of the city. That's where he first saw her, swaying slightly to the music, auburn hair catching the low light, looking somehow both part of the crowd and completely separate from it. When their eyes met, he felt that rare spark people always talk about but rarely experience. It wasn't just her beauty that captivated him, though she was undeniably stunning. There was something in her presence, a self-contained confidence, a hint of mystery, that drew him across the room before he could second-guess himself. "You don't look like you're enjoying the music," he'd said, immediately regretting such a mundane opening. But she'd smiled, revealing a slight dimple in her right cheek. "Actually, I love jazz. I just don't get to hear it live very often these days." Their conversation had flowed effortlessly after that, discovering shared passions for mid-century architecture, obscure documentaries, and a mutual hatred of cilantro that made them both laugh. When the bar closed, they'd exchanged numbers with a promise that felt different from the usual end-of-night platitudes. Their first date had been at an art installation featuring interactive light sculptures. Mark had watched, enchanted, as Ellie moved through the exhibits with childlike wonder, her face illuminated by changing colors as she explained the technical aspects of the projections with unexpected expertise. Their second date was a spontaneous afternoon exploring a neighborhood neither had visited, discovering a hidden bookstore where they challenged each other to find the most interesting title. By the third date, a cooking class where they'd created a spectacularly failed soufflé but couldn't stop laughing, Mark was already imagining possibilities that stretched far beyond the casual dating scene he'd inhabited for years. Then came tonight's confession over dinner at the intimate Italian restaurant he'd carefully selected, where the owner knew his name and had promised the best table. "His name is Noah," Ellie continued, pulling out her phone to show a photo of a grinning 5-year-old with her same warm brown eyes and a constellation of freckles across his nose. "He's my whole world." Mark's silence stretched between them like a widening river. He stared at the photo, trying to reconcile this new information with everything he thought he knew about Ellie. In their conversations, she'd mentioned family but never a child. He'd assumed her limited availability on weekends was due to her demanding job as a graphic designer. "I should have told you sooner," she said, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her water glass, a gesture he'd already come to recognize as her tell when anxious. "I just wanted to be seen as me first, not just as someone's mother. Once people know, it's all they see sometimes." The restaurant continued its Friday night symphony around them, clinking glasses, laughter, the soft murmur of intimate conversations, while Mark's mind raced through implications he'd never considered. His own life was meticulously organized around his career ambitions, his recently purchased condo still containing unpacked boxes, his weekends often consumed by professional networking or rock climbing with friends who were similarly unattached. Children had always been a distant future consideration, not an immediate reality. Mark had grown up in a broken home himself. His father had left when he was 8, leaving behind only fading memories and his mother's bitter resentment that had colored every relationship she attempted afterward. The thought of stepping into another man's abandoned role stirred something uncomfortable in his chest, a mixture of his mother's cautionary warnings about ready-made families, and his own unresolved anger at being left behind. I understand if this changes things, Ellie said quietly, already reaching for her purse, preparing for rejection. Her eyes, which had sparkled with warmth throughout their previous encounters, now held a guarded resignation that suggested she'd been through this conversation before. I've learned it's better to be upfront before feelings get too involved. That's when Mark realized he had a choice, one that would define not just this relationship but perhaps something fundamental about himself. He could retreat to the safety of his uncomplicated life, or he could step into unknown territory with this woman who had already begun to matter to him in ways he hadn't anticipated. Tell me about him, Mark said finally, his voice steadier than he felt. What's he like? The relief that washed over Ellie's face made something twist in his chest. She hesitated, as if assessing whether his question was genuine or merely polite, then slowly returned her purse to the chair beside her. He's incredible, she said, a different kind of light entering her eyes. Stubborn and curious about everything. He collects rocks and can name every dinosaur that ever existed. He's sensitive, cries at commercials with dogs, but tries to act tough. He makes up songs about everything he does, which is adorable and maddening at 6 a.m. As she spoke, Mark watched the transformation, how her entire being seemed illuminated from within. This was Ellie too, perhaps the most authentic version of her, the part she'd kept carefully separated from their budding romance. And his father? Mark asked, the question he'd been avoiding but needed to understand. Ellie's expression tightened slightly. Not in the picture. He decided parenthood wasn't for him when Noah was 2. He lives in Seattle now, calls on birthdays sometimes. The conversation continued through dinner, their planned discussion of a weekend gallery opening forgotten as Mark asked questions and Ellie cautiously shared more about her life as a mother. By the time they stepped outside into the cool evening air, something had shifted between them, not ended, but fundamentally changed. I'd like to meet him, Mark said as they stood beside her car. If you're comfortable with that. Ellie studied his face, searching for hesitation or insincerity. Are you sure? Most guys in your position would be running for the hills right now. I'm not most guys, Mark replied, surprising himself with how true it felt. And I'm not promising anything except that I'd like to know this important part of your life. The following Saturday, Mark sat nervously on a park bench, watching Ellie approach with a small hand clasped in hers. He'd changed shirts 3 times that morning, irrationally concerned about making a good impression on a kindergartner. Noah wore a Spider-Man t-shirt and looked at Mark with undisguised suspicion, partially hiding behind his mother's leg as they approached. You're tall, was Noah's first assessment, tilting his head back to look up at Mark. You're observant, Mark replied, which earned him the first hint of a smile. Mom says you build buildings, Noah continued, his initial shyness rapidly dissolving. I helped design them, Mark clarified. Would you like to see some pictures? Noah nodded eagerly, and just like that, the ice was broken. Mark had thoughtfully loaded his phone with images of his most interesting projects, including a children's museum with slides built into the structure. Noah's enthusiastic questions revealed a mind already fascinated by how things were constructed, something Mark recognized from his own childhood. That afternoon became a turning point. While Noah conquered the playground, occasionally calling for Mark to watch a particularly impressive feat of climbing, Mark and Ellie talked honestly about expectations, boundaries, and fears. She explained her ex-husband's gradual disappearance from their lives, how she'd rebuilt herself from the ground up, working full-time while earning her degree at night, relying on her parents for childcare until they moved to Arizona for retirement. I'm not looking for a replacement father, she said firmly, watching Noah navigate the monkey bars with fierce concentration. Noah and I are a package deal, but we're doing fine on our own. I'm looking for a partner for me, who understands my priorities. Mark appreciated her directness, even as he wrestled with his own hesitations. Dating Ellie meant accepting a level of complexity and responsibility he hadn't anticipated in his life plan. It meant navigating not just one new relationship but 2, with very different expectations and needs. I can't promise I'll be good at this, he admitted. I don't have much experience with kids. But I'd like to try, if you're willing to be patient with me. Ellie's smile was cautious but genuine. Patience is the first skill you learn as a parent. As weeks turned to months, Mark found himself increasingly drawn into their world. Movie nights now included animated features alongside their documentary preferences. His immaculate condo occasionally hosted pillow fort constructions that left cushions scattered everywhere. He discovered unexpected joy in Noah's unfiltered observations, in building elaborate Lego structures together, in being trusted with bedtime stories when Ellie worked late. He learned the delicate balance of being present without overstepping, of supporting without assuming authority. The challenges emerged in unexpected ways. There were canceled dates when Noah got sick, moments when Mark felt like an outsider during family traditions, and the occasional painful comparison to real dad, who remained a mythical figure in Noah's imagination despite his absence. Mark found himself navigating emotions he'd never anticipated, a flash of irrational jealousy when Noah proudly showed a rare birthday card from his father, uncertainty about disciplining a child who wasn't his, the complex dance of building trust with someone whose world had already been fractured by an important man's departure. Their first serious argument came 6 months in, when Mark suggested moving in together. They were at Ellie's modest 2-bedroom apartment, which had become their default gathering place. The suggestion had seemed logical to Mark, they spent most evenings together anyway, and the practical benefits seemed obvious. "You don't understand what you're asking," Ellie said, her voice tight with emotion after Noah had gone to bed. She paced the small living room, arms crossed protectively across her chest. "This isn't just about us. Every decision I make affects him. If you move in and then leave..." "I'm not planning to leave," Mark insisted, frustrated by what felt like a lack of trust after everything they'd built together. "Neither was his father," she shot back, immediately regretting the words as hurt flashed across Mark's face. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken fears. Mark realized then that Ellie's caution wasn't just about protecting Noah, it was about protecting herself from hoping too much, from believing in permanence after having it shattered once before. Her independence wasn't just a personality trait but a hard-won defense mechanism. "That's not fair," he said finally, his voice quiet. "I'm not him." "I know," she whispered, sinking onto the couch beside him. "I'm sorry. But Mark, you have to understand, Noah's already attached to you. He talks about you constantly. If we make this official and it doesn't work out..." "So we're at an impasse," Mark said. "You won't fully let me in because you're afraid I'll leave, but how can I prove I won't leave unless you let me in?" That night, driving home alone, Mark questioned everything. Was he ready for this level of commitment? Was he fooling himself about his capacity to love a child who wasn't his? Was he setting himself up for heartbreak if Ellie never fully trusted him? His friends' voices echoed in his head, their well-meaning warnings about taking on another man's responsibility, their suggestions that at 32, he had plenty of time to find someone with less baggage. The turning point came unexpectedly. One Tuesday evening, Mark arrived to find Ellie sick with the flu, barely able to stand. Her usual childcare arrangement had fallen through, and she'd been about to call Mark to cancel when he showed up with takeout. He stepped in without hesitation, making dinner, helping Noah with homework, managing bedtime routines he'd only observed before. He called his office to take a personal day, then spent Wednesday juggling remote work while making soup, administering medicine, and keeping Noah entertained after school with minimal screen time, as he knew Ellie preferred. As he tucked Noah in, the boy looked up with serious eyes. "Are you going to marry my mom?" Mark nearly choked. We haven't talked about that yet." "You should," Noah said with the straightforward logic of childhood. "She smiles more when you're here. And you make better pancakes than her." Later, checking on Ellie with a cup of tea, Mark found her watching him with new awareness. "You didn't have to do all this," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I wanted to," he replied simply. Something shifted between them that night, a recognition that what they were building wasn't just about romantic love but about creating something larger than themselves. It wasn't the dramatic resolution of a movie, but a quiet acknowledgement that some risks were worth taking, that trust was built in these ordinary moments of showing up when needed. 2 weeks later, Ellie handed him a key to her apartment. "This doesn't mean you're moving in," she clarified. "Not yet. But it means you're welcome anytime. It means we're trying." The journey wasn't smooth. Mark had to confront his own insecurities, particularly when Noah's father briefly reappeared during a business trip to town, creating confusion and reopening old wounds. Ellie struggled to fully share parental responsibilities, sometimes unconsciously shutting Mark out of decisions. They argued about discipline approaches, about Mark's occasional work trips, about finding space for intimacy in a household centered around a child's needs. There were beautiful moments too. Noah's school play where he proudly introduced Mark to his teachers as, "my mom's boyfriend who helps me with science," weekend trips to the coast where they felt like a family, quiet evenings when the three of them fell asleep on the couch watching movies. Mark discovered parts of himself he never knew existed, patience he didn't realize he possessed, a capacity for wonder rekindled by seeing the world through Noah's eyes, a deeper understanding of love that extended beyond romance. When Mark finally did move in, almost a year into their relationship, it was Noah who helped him unpack, solemnly organizing Mark's books according to a color-coding system that made sense only to him. That night, after Noah was asleep, Ellie found Mark standing in the doorway of the boys' room, watching him sleep. "Having second thoughts?" she asked softly. Mark shook his head. "The opposite. I was just thinking that I never expected this to be my life, but now I can't imagine any other one I'd want." 6 months later, Mark began secretly taking woodworking classes, determined to create something meaningful for what he was planning. He spent weekends in a rented workshop space while telling Ellie he was working on a special project at the office. A year and a half after that first coffee date, Mark proposed, not just to Ellie, but in his own way to Noah too, presenting him with a hand-carved wooden box containing a family promise, alongside Ellie's ring. The box itself was designed to look like a treasure chest, with Noah's name carved into the lid and the inside lined with blue velvet. "I'm not trying to replace anyone," he told Noah seriously as they sat together in the living room, Ellie wiping away tears beside them. "But I promise to be here, to listen, to care, and to try my best every day. I promise to respect the family you and your mom have built, and to be grateful if you'll let me be part of it." Noah considered this with the gravity of someone much older, running his fingers over the carved surface of the box. "That's good," he decided finally. "Because I need someone to help me with my science project. And Mom is terrible at the volcano experiments." Ellie laughed through her tears, and Mark felt something settle in his chest, a certainty he'd been searching for his entire adult life without recognizing it. Their wedding was small but joyful, held in the botanical garden where they'd had their 4th date. Noah served as best man, proudly carrying rings on a cushion he insisted on making himself, only slightly lopsided from his earnest efforts. He took his responsibilities so seriously that he refused to smile during the ceremony, his face set in an expression of solemn concentration that made the guests chuckle. During the reception, Mark found himself momentarily alone, watching Ellie laugh with friends while Noah demonstrated his latest dance moves to admiring relatives. The boy had grown an inch in the past year, his face losing some of its baby roundness, his personality becoming more defined with each passing month. Mark realized with a start that he was now measuring his life in Noah's milestones as much as his own: 1st grade beginning, losing a tooth, learning to ride a bike without training wheels. He thought back to that moment in the restaurant, when 3 words had nearly derailed everything before it began. How close he had come to walking away from what had become the center of his life. How many men had walked away from Ellie before him, missing the extraordinary journey that lay beyond that initial revelation. Ellie caught his eye across the room and smiled, that same smile that had first captured his attention in the jazz bar.